So let's go ahead and continue to talk about life. In the last lecture, we were talking about the features of life, the characteristics of life, what makes something living versus non-living. Those are important things for us to consider as we explore the semester. And we left off with the last general feature of life is that living things have the ability to adapt to your environment. Individuals adapt, but populations evolve. Okay, so now that we got the basics of what is living down, let's take a look at how life is organized. And the fun thing about biology is that things change all the time. New information is presented. Scientists discover new things, more research is done, and things change. Biology is a constantly changing field. This is one of the reasons why biological books are constantly being updated. When I was in school, a lot of this information was not known to the scientific world, and then it's been discovered, it's been learned, and it's new information. So when we look at life, we try to organize life into groups. A lot of times we use just basic physical features to organize and kind of categorize life. This is one of your learning outcomes for the semester. List the ascending levels of biological organization and classification. So we talked about the organization. That's, they go from molecular to cellular all the way up to ecosystem. Classification is how do we group all these living things into different categories. The general system is known as the Linnaean system of classification. This is things are grouped based upon physical characteristics. There are other classification systems where we use molecular information, we use behavioral, we use all sorts of different ways of classifying. But the very general one is Linnaean system of classification. It's kind of like a big, gigantic umbrella type of system in which life is grouped into more and more specific groups based upon physical features. And I'll show you an example as we get into this part of the lecture. But to start with, all living things, those 1.8 million known species, are grouped into one of three different domains. Now, domains are very broad, big, large categories. They're not real specific. They're very general. The three domains known to science today, which this is most likely going to change in the next 10 to 15 years, but the three domains known today are the domain archaea, the domain bacteria, and the domain eukarya. Okay? Every living thing goes into one of those three groups, one of those three domains. The main one we're probably going to focus on, or we often focus the most on, is this domain here called eukarya. This is where humans fit. This is where we know the most information because, hey, this is the neat stuff. This is the plants, the animals, the fungi, the protistas. Bacteria, those are your single-celled organisms. Some are good, some are bad. We have round, rods, squiggly ones. We know a fair amount of information about bacteria, but it's changing. Those of you thinking about healthcare, heard about a bacteria called MRSA? Well, MRSA goes into the domain bacteria. The key feature here, when we look at a MRSA cell, there's a cell, its DNA is in this big squiggly region called the nucleoid region. That's what makes MRSA different than the archaea and different than the eukarya. In eukarya, key feature, if we look at an animal cell, plant cell, fungi, etc., we have a little nucleus. That's what houses all of our DNA. Okay, so it's just one basic feature is what puts you into these different categories, these different domains. Archaea, these are single-celled organisms, but what makes them different than the bacteria is that they have this cell wall that is different than what we would see over here in the bacteria. The archaea still have a nucleoid region with all of their DNA scattered about, but their cell wall is what makes them a little bit unique. Okay, so we start out with a domain. You find something new in the refrigerator. You're like, wow, here's something new. What is it? Look at the basic feature. Put it into a domain. Once you've classified to a domain, you then drop down to the kingdom level. Currently, there are 6 kingdoms recognized. Now, when we look at it, the first kingdom here is known as Eubacteria. Sometimes you'll see this also called kingdom bacteria. Single-celled organisms, they have certain cellular features, they have that nucleoid region. So these are little bacterial cells. If we could zoom in and see their DNA, we would see this loop of DNA scattered throughout the central part of their cell. That's what makes them a eubacteria. When we look at the kingdom next to them, this is the Archaea kingdom. Okay, they happen to have the same domain names. The Archaea, the key feature here is generally these guys are found in really nasty environments. This is a black smoker. This is the bottom of the ocean, a thermal vent in which magma is coming up and hitting the seawater. And that's what creates this gas cloud. Incredibly harsh environments, toxic chemicals, you got a lot of sulfur, intense pressure, absolutely no sunlight. But bacteria, or the Archaea, can survive here. They're able to live in that environment. So this is a group that we don't know much about. The Archaea is still being explored because there's just a lot that we don't know about in regards to the Archaea. Okay, so there are 2 of the kingdoms. Kingdom number 3, we look to the left, fungi, mushrooms, toadstools, yeast, things that make beer and bread and wine, things that cause infections, athlete's foot, etc. All go into kingdom fungi. To the right here, this is a weird group. We call it kingdom protista. Lots of goofy, weird things that don't fit anywhere else. Those all go into this kingdom. Down on the bottom, that looks pretty self-explanatory. Kingdom plantae. Can you run photosynthesis? Do you have a cell wall made of cellulose? And then kingdom animalia. Do you eat stuff? Are you made up of a lot of cells? You're into that kingdom. So kingdom level classification really isn't that much more detailed than the domain, but it does add another layer of criteria. So to be an animal, you have to have a nucleus. To be in the domain Eukarya, then you have to have lots of cells and you have to eat things. To be a plant, you need a nucleus, but then you need to run photosynthesis and you need to have a cell wall made of cellulose. Now what becomes fun? What happens if you find an organism that has some of these features plus these features? What does that equal? Does that give us a new kingdom? If we were to put plant and animal together, do we now call it planimal? And that's what we're finding out. There are things out there that don't fit the rules. We have to keep coming up with new ways of classification, new classification levels, things like that, to organize these things. Okay, so here's a big overall of the Linnaean classification system. Domain is your broadest. It's estimated there are between 4 and 10 million species in the domain Eukarya. We know 1.8 million total species. There's still a lot out there for us to learn. I mean, the estimations are anywhere between 10 and 100 million species on this planet. We've just scratched the surface. A new level of classification has been added called supergroups. We're not going to focus on that. That's still very new. It's being used, but for our purposes, we're just going to drop down to kingdom level. So we're going to go domain. We're going to then go to kingdom. From the kingdom, you then drop down to phylum. Phylum goes to class. Class goes to order. Order to family. Family to genus. Genus to species. Okay, so this is an important flow chart to remember. What is the classification levels? To get a specific species name, lupus, and we often refer to things by their genus and species. So Canis lupus, that's our gray wolf. It has to fit all the criteria in every level above it. You have to have the feature of the eukarya, the animal, the chordata, the mammal, the carnivora, canidae, then canis, then lupus. So to be the same species here, to have two wolves next to each other that are of the same species, they have to have all of these same features in common to then classify them as the same species. Okay, so that gives us an idea of the diversity of what we have on the planet. There's a whole lot out there. There's a lot of life out there and still a lot of life to explore. As we go through the semester, something we will look at is how our population, our species, the human population, the human species, is impacting the entire planet. We are the most influential species right now on this planet, and we're having a major, major impact upon the health of the entire planet. Climate change is occurring. It is causing things to change. Things are not doing well. Some species are doing great. They're actually increasing in population. But the vast majority are not. And we'll talk about this later in the semester, but we are looking at moving towards a sixth mass extinction, which will be very, very detrimental to the entire planet. Humans in particular will suffer significantly with this issue. So these are things we want to look at as what is our impact, our individual impact, but then our population or species impact, and what can we do? And I'm not asking you guys, give up life the way you know it, just go live in a cave and eat berries, but there's lots of little things we can do that benefit us tremendously that will make a difference globally. And we'll get into that more as we get into ecology and ecosystems and those other units of the semester. Okay, so as we go through this semester, as we go through these different topics, I want you guys to really understand how this knowledge and information is gained. It is not just poof, randomly, I think. It is gained through the process of science. There's a very specific process we use in order to get information in the scientific world. It's not just randomly created. Somebody doesn't just pop an idea in their head and say, hey, I'm going to tell everybody this and you're all supposed to accept it. It is done through the scientific method. Lots of times we reject ideas. We ignore it and say, you know what? There's not enough information. Science is a very analytical process. We look for data. We look for cause and effect in data to support our ideas. If you can't test it scientifically, it doesn't go in this world. It doesn't go in the scientific world. Okay, so a learning outcome for this semester is analyzing a problem using the scientific method. If you think and you believe, that's fantastic, but if you can't do it through the scientific method, we're not going to consider it scientifically based evidence. Doesn't mean it's not good evidence or good information or good ideas, but when you go to your doctor, you don't want your doctor to say, I think you're sick because this is just an idea I came up with. You want that doctor to have been trained to understand the scientific method, to understand the germ theory, to understand how to solve these problems in a very specific manner, not just, I got a hunch, I got a guess. And we don't do it that way when it comes to scientific information. In other areas of our lives, not a problem at all. You know, I have a lot of belief and faith that someday the Chicago Bears will win the Super Bowl. The evidence is there that they suck. But my faith, my belief says no, that there's a different perspective. That's great. That's what gives us fans at football games. That's what kept the fans of the Cubs going for almost 100 years or 100 plus years, whatever it was their belief. The evidence was not there. Eventually, though, they found the evidence. So science is, again, a very evidence-based type of study or type of knowledge. We look for evidence to support this. So that's what we're going to explore in the third lecture here is the process of science, how we can get through this. So this may be something you guys have all dealt with. Oh man, the car won't start. How do we figure this out? Through the process of science.